FreeCAD is a completely free 3D modeling software that anyone can use. To download FreeCAD, go to freecad.org and click the Download Now button. Then select the operating system you are using and download the appropriate installation file. If you are using Windows, you can download the installation file and install FreeCAD on your computer. The installation process is standard, or you can also download an archive, and after unpacking the archive, you can simply run FreeCAD. And this is the version that does not require installation. Here you go to the bin folder and then run the freecad.exe file. Simply, without installation, you can run FreeCAD and you can start creating your own 3D models. FreeCAD also works on Mac and Linux, and you can use FreeCAD on these systems as well. What is worth emphasizing is that, besides the fact that FreeCAD works on different operating systems, you can also install FreeCAD on any number of computers. If you have several computers, for example, you have a computer in the office and a computer in the workshop, you can install FreeCAD on both computers and freely use this system. You don't have to register anywhere, you don't have to provide your data, you simply install FreeCAD and you can start creating your own 3D models. Everything you do on your own computer. Files are not saved in the cloud unless you want them to be saved in the cloud. You can simply save these files on Google Drive or OneDrive and then you have these files in the cloud. But if you don't want to do that, you can do everything locally on your computer. FreeCAD does not require internet access, so even if you have a computer in a place where you have limited internet access, you can still create your own 3D models. That's why I think it's worth learning FreeCAD. You'll find many tutorials on my channel, and in this series I want to present FreeCAD in the form of very short lessons. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next lessons. When you first launch FreeCAD, a window will appear where you can set basic settings. Here you can choose the language of FreeCAD, the unit system, and the navigation style. Regarding the unit system, select the units you use. I am using the standard unit system here. As for the navigation style, here we define the way we will navigate in FreeCAD. I use the Blender navigation style because it is the most comfortable for me. We can change the navigation style at any time. There is also the option to change the navigation style. If you hover over this spot and hold the cursor there, a tooltip will appear explaining how navigation works with the selected style. Next, we can specify the theme. We have the option of a light theme and a dark theme, but we also have a third theme for FreeCAD, the classic theme, which we can select in the preferences. I have chosen the classic theme and I use this theme. This also comes from habits, and this theme suits me best. But if another theme suits you better, you can use that one, because FreeCAD works the same regardless of the theme. There may be minor differences in the arrangement of icons, but that is also not a problem, since we can change that. If you want to change the arrangement of the icons, just grab the dots and drag the icon bar to the appropriate place. We will go over this in other videos. Now, let's move on to the preferences. Here we have a menu bar. If you're working on Windows, select Edit Preferences, and if you're on a Mac, click the FreeCAD menu and select Preferences here. In this place, we define the program Preferences. We can choose the classic theme. As for the program preferences, let's go to the Display and Colors tab. Here we can set the background color. In the classic theme, I have set a linear gradient, which is responsible for the background gradient of the workspace area. Another important place regarding colors is the Sketcher and Appearance tab. Here we set the colors of the lines. If it turns out that during sketching a line is poorly visible or the color of that line doesn't suit you, you can change the color of that line here. I will leave the settings as they are. This is the first thing you should see after launching FreeCAD. FreeCAD is a powerful, free 3D modeling tool with a modular structure. This means that the software functions are divided into workbenches, which are working environments, each designed for different types of tasks. Choosing the right environment can be crucial for effective work, especially for beginner users. The first work environment worth noting is the Part Design Workbench. This is a module for parametric modeling of technical parts based on features and parameters. In this module, we can build a 3D model step by step in a non-destructive manner, meaning that throughout the entire design process, we can go back to an earlier stage and make changes. Working in this module is similar to working in other 3D CAD systems. Here, we create 3D solids based on 2D sketches and solid operations. The Sketcher workbench is closely related to this work environment, where we create 2D sketches that we use in the part design workbench. These two FreeCAD modules work closely together. For most beginners, starting to work with FreeCAD is best done by getting to know these modules. Another module that allows for the creation of 3D models is the part workbench. However, in this case, we create 3D models using logical operations such as union, intersection, or subtraction on simple shapes like spheres, cones, or cuboids. In my opinion, this method of modeling and working in the part environment offers fewer possibilities than working in the part design environment. Therefore, I believe it is better to start with the part design environment. At a later stage of learning, it is worth familiarizing yourself with the part environment, because when creating a project in FreeCAD, we can use the capabilities of different work environments within a single project. Sometimes the capabilities of the part environment may come in handy. In summary, the workbenches in FreeCAD are tools divided according to different applications. In many cases, familiarity with only the part design and Sketcher environments will be sufficient. At the beginning of your FreeCAD journey, it is advisable to focus solely on these two environments, and only later, as needed, to explore individual selected tools from other environments. You already know that in FreeCAD we will be working in the part design module using the Sketcher module. To start a new project in the part design module, we select this module and click this icon, or simply click the parametric part button. We have started a new project in the part design module, and what's worth noting is that a body type object has been created here. We will return to this shortly, but in this lesson I want to briefly discuss customizing the interface to your needs. You already know how we can change the theme. You could use the light theme or the dark theme. I am using the classic theme here. We have selected the Blender navigation style, which we will also discuss shortly. Now, regarding the user interface, my interface looks like this. If you want to customize the interface to your needs, you can change the position of these icons, or you can hide some of these icons. As for changing the position of these icons, they are grouped into certain categories. To change the position of a selected group of icons, we click on those dots and drag the group of icons to another place. If these icons are not visible here and you would like them to be visible, or if you want to disable these icons, click here with the right mouse button and you have the individual groups of icons here. If I disable the part design modeling icon group now, some of these icons will disappear and they will not be visible in this menu, and if you want to enable them, right-click and select the desired icon group so that it is visible. As for the commands that are under the icons, we will very often use these commands, so it's worth having these commands available in the icons. If some command is not visible here, or if you don't want these icons in this place, all commands are also available in the drop-down menu. The drop-down menu bar is not visible in the recording, but I have now expanded the part design menu, and here we have the commands that are available under the icons. In the part design menu, the tools of this module are available, which we can use during 3D modeling of parts in the part design module. However, in most cases, we will use these basic commands, so it's worth having these commands available under the icons. In a moment, we will move on to creating 3D models, but first we will discuss the basics of navigation in FreeCAD. When it comes to navigation in FreeCAD, as I mentioned, we have several different navigation styles. I use the Blender navigation style, and after selecting this navigation style, when you hover over this area, a tooltip will appear indicating how navigation works with this navigation style. So, the first thing related to navigation is selecting geometry in FreeCAD. When it comes to selecting geometry related to a 3D object, we can select faces, edges, and vertices. You can select multiple geometry. To do this, press the Control key and hold it while clicking the geometry you want to select. This can be useful for some solid operations. As for rotating, we do it by pressing the mouse wheel and simply moving the mouse, and the object will rotate. If you want to move the object, press the Shift key and the mouse wheel, then you can move the object. If you want to zoom in or out of the view, we also do this using the mouse wheel. By scrolling the mouse wheel, we zoom in and out of the view. If you press both the left and right mouse buttons, you can move the object. You can also do this by pressing Shift and the mouse wheel, or by pressing both buttons simultaneously. And also, when it comes to selecting geometry, we have geometry selection modes here. We can choose vertex selection mode, and then we can only select vertices. If we select edge selection mode, we can only select edges. Next we have face selection mode, then we can select faces, or we choose this option, and then we can select all elements of the object. Selection modes can also be useful in some cases. Another thing related to navigation in FreeCAD is the standard views. And here, in the upper right corner, we have a cube that allows us to set the specified view. We can click with the left mouse button on the selected faces of the cube, and the model will be set in that view. We can also use the arrows to rotate the view, which is very convenient. As for the standard views, we have an option for standard views here as well. We can choose these views, and we also have an isometric view. If we select this option, the model will be set to this view. Another useful feature is that sometimes when we zoom in or out too much on the model and don't know where the model is, we can click the Fit All button to fit the entire model within the workspace, so this can be useful in some cases too. Another helpful thing is the section view. This option can be found in the View menu. The drop-down menu bar is not visible in the recording, but I am now expanding the View menu, and here we have the option for Persistent Section Cut. Select this option, and now we can specify the cutting plane. For example, we can set the cutting plane along the x-axis, and here we can observe the solid in cross-section. When you click the Close button, the solid that was created by the section view will remain in the workspace. Now I will turn off the visibility of this main solid. As for turning the visibility of objects on and off in FreeCAD, we do this by selecting the object in the operation tree and then pressing the spacebar. The view of the selected object will be turned off. We have a section view, and this section view is still in the project. To remove it, we simply click the left mouse button and select Delete. Then it will be divided into such objects, and we can also delete these objects. We select and press Delete to remove them. Now, I am selecting the body again and pressing the spacebar to turn the visibility of this object back on. An important thing when it comes to creating 3D models in FreeCAD is to regularly save your work progress. If you started a project and want to save it, simply click on the Save icon or choose Save As from the File menu. Then specify the location and name of the file and save it. If you make any changes to the file, just click on the Save icon again and the changes will be saved. And if you want to open a project, you simply select File Open and then specify the file you want to open. FreeCAD files are saved with the FCSTD extension, and these are the native files of FreeCAD. You cannot open these files in another software. These files can only be opened in FreeCAD. However, FreeCAD allows exporting 3D models to the STEP format, which is a universal data exchange format between 3D CAD systems. Then, if you create a 3D model in FreeCAD, someone else who doesn't use FreeCAD will be able to open that model in their own system. Of course, the STEP format has certain limitations. This format doesn't transfer operation history, but the ability to transfer a solid from FreeCAD to another 3D CAD system is really a significant capability, expanding collaboration possibilities with users of other 3D CAD systems. The same works in the opposite direction. If someone uses another 3D CAD system, they can save a model in the STEP format, and you will be able to open that model in FreeCAD. Now I will open another file, and as you can see in FreeCAD, we can have multiple files open. We can work on several projects simultaneously. Here, in the operation tree, we have the first project, we have the second project, so As you can see, we can open several files at once, but at the initial stage of learning FreeCAD, I recommend working with one file so as not to introduce unnecessary confusion and to focus on the most important things at the beginning. In this lesson, we will create our first sketch and start from the beginning. We launch FreeCAD and select Parametric Part Creation. Here we begin the project in the Part Design module. As I mentioned earlier, the Sketcher module is closely related to this module, where we create 2D sketches that serve as the basis for creating a 3D model. To start creating a sketch, we click this icon, Create Sketch. Next, we specify the sketch plane. We have 3 basic coordinate system planes to choose from: the XY plane, the XZ plane, and the YZ plane. Let's choose the XY plane. To select this plane, we click the left mouse button on this plane. Now this plane is the sketch plane, and as you can see, we have been switched to the Sketcher module. We have access to the sketching tools. Here we have tools related to creating geometry and tools related to constraints. Constraints are very useful, and we will get to that shortly, but for now we will create some simple geometry. The general principle of creating geometry in FreeCAD is that we select the geometry we want to create. We have several basic shapes. Let's choose to draw a rectangle. Then we specify 2 vertices of the rectangle. As you noticed while drawing the rectangle, we can specify the dimensions of this rectangle. Type here, for example, 100, press Enter. We have been switched to specify the dimension of the second side, and here type 70, press Enter, and right-click to cancel the rectangle drawing command. As you can see, we have created 2 rectangles. This rectangle is dimensioned, and we cannot change the dimensions of this rectangle, while this rectangle is not dimensioned, and we can freely change its dimensions. For this rectangle, the dimensions are constraints that limit the degrees of freedom of this geometry. As I mentioned, we will get to that shortly. In this lesson, I wanted to show you how we can start sketching and how to create a simple, basic geometry, such as a rectangle. Let's go back to this simple project. We created the first simple solid based on a simple sketch, and now I will move on to editing this sketch. I expand the pad operation and double-click the left mouse button on the sketch I want to edit. Here, in this case, it is worth noting one thing. This rectangle is dimensioned. We have certain degrees of freedom eliminated regarding the dimensions of this rectangle, but we have not eliminated the degrees of freedom regarding the position of this rectangle. I can freely change the position of this rectangle in the working area. As for the degrees of freedom, we have the number of degrees of freedom here. If you click in this spot, the degrees of freedom will be highlighted in the working area. We have information here that the geometry is not fully constrained. When creating 2D geometry, on the basis of which we create 3D solids, it is worth striving to ensure that this geometry is fully constrained, meaning we aim to remove all degrees of freedom. Of course, if we do not do this, it is not a mistake. In the case of simple geometries, this may not matter much, but in the case of somewhat more complex geometries, if these geometries are not fully constrained, we may accidentally damage the sketch. This may affect the later stages of design, especially if we are designing a part in several or a dozen stages. We create a sketch, add a solid operation, then create another sketch, add another operation, and so on. If, for example, the sketch in the early stages is not fully constrained, and we accidentally change the shape or position of such a sketch, it may affect subsequent stages of the project, and the entire project may simply be damaged. Therefore, let's strive from the beginning of learning the basics to aim at removing all degrees of freedom. In this case, we can remove these 2 degrees of freedom by applying certain constraints. We can either constrain this corner of the rectangle to this point, or we can place the rectangle symmetrically relative to the coordinate axis. We can do this in such a way that we first place this rectangle symmetrically relative to the y-axis. To do this, we select this point, and select the y-axis. Then we choose the symmetry constraint, and as you can see, we already have only 1 degree of freedom. This rectangle is symmetrically placed relative to the y-axis. I cannot change the position of the rectangle by moving it left or right. I can change the position of this rectangle by moving it up and down. Here along this axis, we already have a degree of freedom removed. Next, we can apply the symmetry constraint between this point, and the x-axis. We select these 2 points, select the x-axis, and choose the symmetry constraint. As you can see, the sketch changed color to green, and we have information here that the sketch is fully constrained. Now I cannot change the dimensions or the position of this geometry because it is fully constrained and all degrees of freedom have been removed. This is exactly what we strive for, that the geometry in the sketch is green, meaning the geometry in the sketch is fully constrained. I'll show you an interesting fact. I will press Ctrl Z to undo these 2 constraints. Okay, I can again freely change the position of the rectangle in the working area. We have 2 degrees of freedom. As for the symmetry constraint, we can apply this constraint, just like in this case, relative to the line, but we can also apply the symmetry constraint relative to a point. To do this, we select 2 points, and then we select a third point relative to which we want to symmetrically position these points. The third geometry is like the axis of symmetry. In this case, this geometry relative to which we will symmetrically position the other 2 points will be the origin of the coordinate system. We select this corner of the rectangle, then select this corner of the rectangle, and as the last third point we select the origin of the coordinate system. We choose the symmetry constraint, and now this rectangle has been placed symmetrically both relative to the y-axis and relative to the x-axis. We have a fully constrained sketch. We cannot freely change either the dimensions or the position of this geometry. This is what we strive for when creating 2D sketches on the basis of which we build a 3D model. In the previous lesson, I showed you how to start sketching in FreeCAD, how to begin creating a sketch from which we can create a 3D model. We created such a simple shape. Sometimes it may happen that we close the sketch, but after a while we want to edit that sketch. In FreeCAD, we have that option. We can easily do it, just double-click the left mouse button on the sketch in the features tree, and this way we can enter sketch editing mode. We can make some changes here. For example, let's remove this rectangle. To remove geometry in the sketcher in FreeCAD, we can select that geometry with the selection box and press the delete key, or we can simply click the left mouse button on the geometry in the sketcher and then press the delete key to remove that geometry. When selecting geometry in FreeCAD, we do not have to hold down the shift key or the control key. We just click the left mouse button on the geometry we want to select and press delete to remove that geometry. We close the sketch and the changes have been made to the sketch. And here is one important thing. As you can see, this sketch is associated with a body object, and this sketch is closely related to this object. This sketch simply belongs to this object, and based on this sketch we can create a solid. If we choose the operation to create a solid based on the sketch, we will create a solid by extruding the sketch. Select the pad operation. This operation is also known as sketch extrusion. Here we define the length of the extrusion, click OK, and based on that sketch we created a solid by extruding the sketch to a specified distance. As you can see, at this moment the sketch is not visible in the operations tree, but the fact that it is not visible doesn't mean that the sketch doesn't exist. If we expand the pad operation, we can see that this sketch is inside that operation. This means that this sketch belongs to this operation, that the pad operation was added based on this sketch, and we created a solid by extruding the sketch based on this sketch. If you would like to edit this sketch, we can certainly do that. We can double-click the left mouse button on this sketch, or right-click and select Edit Sketch. We'll get back to editing this sketch in a moment, but that's where we'll end this lesson. See you in the next lesson.